guys, so here's a little Q&A video. I did this because I got a lot of questions about how to incorporate art into paleontology in the sense of being an actual paleo artist. So I thought I would just do a video about that and then link you to some resources below. A paleo artist, what they do is they typically create reconstructions under the direction of a paleontologist. For example, if I was working with a paleo artist and I was describing T-Rex, then I would talk to the paleo artist. I would show them the anatomy of the animal. I would talk to them about the size, ecology. So where did T-Rex live? Did they like to live in the forest or in the desert? You know, things like that. So basically the artist is informing all of his artwork decisions through science. And sometimes if we don't know a lot about a prehistoric animal, the artist can have some license. So if we really had no idea about what color T-Rex's skin was, then the artist sort of has license to do whatever looks cool. But most of the time they are making every decision in line with the science so that it's accurate, and teaching the public or the reader or other scientists about what this animal might have looked like. And I think their job is really important because it gives you a full idea of what these animals looked like. Dinosaurs wouldn't be nearly as broadly known about and popularized if we didn't have paleo artists reconstructing them. I mean, a lot of times you all have seen from the activities I did with you, a lot of these things we know from fragmentary bone. And a lot of times we don't have complete skeletons of animals at all. So it's really important to be able to have artists who can reimagine these things in their full capacity to educate not only the public and students, but also other scientists. In terms of some key steps to becoming a paleo artist, I've had experience with some of these just because my experience of being an artist and interning in the exhibition department at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. So as many of you know, I helped create dioramas for 2 traveling exhibits at the American Museum of Natural History when I interned in the exhibition department there. That involved working with several different scientists to make sure everything was accurate, redrawing things, working with curators there, working with other scientists, emailing scientists who didn't even work at the museum. If there was an expert who didn't work at the museum and we needed to check on, say, the shape of a pot because we were making a diorama of an Aztec marketplace in Mexico. So we would ask about the shape of a pot or the color of their clothing or how the foods were arranged in the marketplace. So there is restriction in terms of scientific illustration in that it does need to be as accurate as possible. So if a curator had told us each of the fruits and vegetables and other goods like fish and jaguar skin in the Aztec marketplace would have their own section, their own row in the market, and things would be very neatly laid out. Now, if we as artists went in and we started, showing all of these goods kind of thrown about haphazardly in the marketplace, that would be incorrect. Of course, mistakes happen and science changes over time, so maybe what we think is accurate now could change and sometimes can change rapidly, but we would do our best to make sure that what we're presenting matches the current science. So in terms of things you can do right now, I think definitely reaching out to intern somewhere would be a great idea. And it doesn't need to be at a big museum. Even small museums have exhibition departments or they have artists working for them. And you can find these people on museum websites and actually email them, maybe ask them how they became a paleo artist, or what programs do they use, where did they go to school, did they go to school for art, how did they get into this, how did they learn anatomy of animals. Not all paleo artists work at museums either. I mean, there's a lot of people that operate online because a lot of the paleo art is digital. So that's another thing I would make sure you can do art digitally and manually. In terms of digital art, I would try to gain skills in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. A lot of it you can learn honestly just from Googling it and trying and playing with things on your own. That's what I do. I've been doing that for years. I've never taken a class in either of those, and I can do so much in Photoshop and Adobe just from figuring out on my own, looking up tutorials. There's so many YouTube videos, so many free tutorials online about this kind of stuff. And you really need to know both because they both do have different functions. And especially for scientific illustration, you'll often have to edit photos in Photoshop first and then transfer them to Illustrator. Another thing I would do, other than becoming an apprentice or intern, learning digital methods of art making and just practicing drawing and manual methods of art making. The third thing I would do is make sure that you really know animal anatomy well. And I don't mean that you have to memorize all of the bones and all of the parts of an animal, and you don't need to necessarily know how it works, how its metabolism works, how it digests things, for example. But you do need to know sort of basic structures so that you can make a sort of a skeletal framework of an animal in your mind, and that will help you to create more realistic reconstructions. And it will help you a lot because a lot of times when you're creating a work of art as a paleo artist, you need to be able to come up with interesting poses for an animal, and you can't really do that unless you have a good understanding of how animals are put together. So for example, in birds and a lot of dinosaurs, especially bird-like dinosaurs, it almost looks like the knee is backwards, and that's not true. That it's just that the knee is so high up in birds compared to, you know, our knee. So often you can't see the knee because it's sort of tucked into the feathers, and then what you're actually seeing is the tibia going backwards and then the ankle going back forwards. So, you know, if you're drawing dinosaurs, things like that, you want to have that in your mind so you don't accidentally draw something incorrectly or, you know, make a pose that looks stiff or not very lifelike. A last note on manual art, I would try to learn drawing, number one, because that's really, drawing is the one art skill that you need that is relevant to any other type of art you do, no matter what it is. And then from there, I would try to think about what you're most interested in. So do you like to work with something thicker, like oil paints? Are you the kind of person who likes to draw with the graphite, or would you like to start with the page covered with graphite and then erase to make your drawing? Because that will also inform your method choice. So if you're the kind of person that likes to draw with an eraser, then I would recommend watercolor because it's similar to that, it's working backwards. If you're a person who likes to draw or like paint on top of paint on top of paint, then I would suggest acrylic or oil paint. And there's so many different methods out there, sculpture, printmaking, I would just remind you that, you know, a lot of these supplies, it doesn't need to be expensive. You can make masterpieces with really, you know, cheap art supplies, and the price of the art supplies does not correlate with how good the art is. So just remember that. So thanks for watching this Q&A video, and I'll be back soon to answer more of your questions.